Hey everyone, I'm John Lynn, the founder and chief editor at Healthcare IT Today. We're excited to bring you a really interesting look into the challenges of COVID and the financial implications for healthcare. And it's going to be a great discussion. And my special guest is Bret Schiller. He's head of healthcare for corporate client banking and specialized industries at JP Morgan Commercial Banking. Welcome, Bret.
Yeah, thank you, John. Appreciate carving out the time, and nice to be here with you and your listeners.
Yeah, definitely. So, for those that aren't familiar with you or your organization, tell us a little bit about yourself and JP Morgan's work in healthcare.
Yeah, so as you said, the division that I run is called it's corporate client banking. That division sits in between the commercial bank and the investment bank, and so the bankers on my team, deliver both sets of products to mid and large cap companies across the healthcare continuum.
Gotcha. So, it's interesting because everyone knows JP Morgan, right?
Yeah.
But I don't think they know is familiar with the healthcare side. So it's going to be fun to hear some perspectives. But
Sure.
how are you seeing healthcare organizations' finances really thanks to COVID? I mean, what a big financial impact it seems.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, COVID has been interesting all the way around.
Sure.
Healthcare, I think, as you well know, from a financing perspective, a performance perspective, has been relatively insulated from COVID, right? There have been pockets where services have been lighter. There have been pockets where companies have done quite well because of COVID. As far as financing, there was a patch, let's call it the March through May timeframe, where the only financing sources open to healthcare companies were really the banks. The capital markets were shut. Companies could not raise equity or debt, and so the banks were it. And so we saw a flurry of activity, not only in healthcare but across all of the different industries within the bank. Healthcare was relatively insulated, though. There were, as I said, there were some pockets of weakness, but as far as access to capital, the clients that we had that sought capital, most of the healthcare companies across the spectrum had access to it. And so, you hate to talk about a bright spot, during a pandemic. Healthcare was, one of the brighter areas to be in compared to other industries.
Sure. It seems like that was maybe the biggest challenge was there was a 3 to 4 month question of how much revenue they need and do we have the cash we need? Is that kind of what you saw as well?
Particularly on the provider side, where, they were either statutory closures of not closures of hospitals, but the ability to do elective surgeries where that was sort of curtailed. So anybody who touched, that type of procedure, whether that's the surgeon, he or herself, the medical device company, the hospital, and it wasn't like, and it still isn't, that demand went away. It was just warehoused. And so, for the 3 or 4 month period, all of those things got pushed back. We're seeing that, you could call it de-warehousing, I guess, if that's a word, normalizing. And so those were really the weakest spots, and those are normalizing.
So do you think there was a bit of a have and a have nots, as far as the damage that was caused by COVID, or, it sounds like most of healthcare was somewhat pretty insulated from it, or do you see kind of this have nots kind of playing out in the financial side of things as well?
Yeah. It's hard to, trumpet sort of, people who just knocked it out of the park, right? With, during a pandemic. But there were definitely companies that did better, companies that were, involved in PPE, either manufacturing or distribution. Insurance performed well last year. So different pockets, performed potentially better than expected. And then, like I said, the weakness was seen somewhat on the provider side, although that's right sizing. So we haven't had any, as opposed to other industries, and I think we know what those are. We haven't had anything where it's going to be a permanent disruption of demand for, for a service or, or a product, which is great. And healthcare, again, has been a bright spot.
Yeah. It's interesting how you comment. We almost don't want to like proclaim success. Obviously, we do a lot of IT stuff at Healthcare IT Today, and so telehealth obviously
Sure.
has
Yeah.
just blown it out of the park.
Yep. That's a
Although
winner.
interestingly, is that going to come back to bite them because they had to scale up to 90% and then they got to scale down to 40? So
Yeah.
that's going to be interesting as well.
It will, as you talk about, winners, losers, that, the pull forward of that technology from not just, the millennial category has always been more comfortable with technologies, like telehealth and televisits but now, since we've all been sitting in our houses for 9 months, 10 months, the comfort level stretches to elderly populations, people who, really had no interest necessarily in connecting through Zoom or telehealth, or that is going to be a permanent option that I think was pulled forward by years and really stretching different generations.
And do you think that that shift to telehealth and, really still shifting payment models around telehealth, is that going to impact healthcare organizations and their financials?
I think it will. That's another sort of pull forward where people on the provider side, health systems, people who were putting off some capital expenditures, people who were putting off spending on IT, getting systems interoperability together, that has been pulled forward as well from a lot of different clients that we have, different people we've spoken with. It was a sense of, okay, enough, like we need to be better connected. And so whether that's on the payment side, whether that's just on practice management, we need to go ahead and spend the money. This is showing us that any sort of hiccup in the technology, we can't have now. So that's again another pull forward.
And what are you seeing on that payment side of the house? What are some strategies healthcare organizations are doing? Seems like that's become really important where cash is king,
Yeah,
as
sure,
they recover from, some of the damages of last year. Granted, they
sure.
got some CARES Act money to help as well. But,
Yep.
what are you seeing them do to kind of improve the payment side of the house?
No, I think that's exactly right. They are spending that money that was, and I hate to use the warehouse again, but they are spending the money on the technology to get their house in order. Um, any sort of plans where that was going to be postponed, we are seeing this put in action.
Yeah. Have you done any work with healthcare price transparency? Do you think organizations should be worried about, this move to more transparency? And what would be your advice to organizations dealing with that?
Yeah, as you well know too, price transparency has been talked about. Whether that is surprise billing or things that we've seen with PBMs, things that we've seen with insurance companies and health systems. Sometimes it depends on different administrations. We saw the Trump administration, particularly in the later years,
Yeah.
calling for, asking for more transparency, definitely on the PBM side, on the hospital side. It will be, it remains to be seen what the Biden administration will do on those counts. I think no one who works in those businesses is shocked, or they know that at some level someone will start to go down that path again. I'm sure. I know that they've all got contingency plans. I know they've run alternative models, things around balance billing. I think sorry, and it's a convoluted answer. I think that it remains to be seen, just with the Biden administration, just how much they want to pursue that. I think that they're going to be pursuing access more than transparency for the time being.
Yeah, I think that's a great insight because there's few things in healthcare that are bipartisan.
Yeah, that's right.
But interestingly, transparency, interoperability really were two of those bedrocks, and use of technology, I guess, if you want to throw in a third one.
Yep.
But I think your point's right that the discussion is going to be about access.
Yeah.
for the Biden administration. So I think that's a really great insight versus some of these other things, which interestingly are bipartisan.
Yeah.
But so,
Yeah.
it'll be interesting. Will CMS and ONC continue to push it forward, even though the administration may not be?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, look, I mean, consumerism in healthcare just continues and continues. So transparency and health pricing, insurance companies obviously like it because then they get an idea about pricing and things. But ultimately, as more of the cost of care is pushed to consumers, then obviously they want transparency as well. So this will continue to come up. Just timing, I couldn't make a guess.
Sure. No, I mean, let's not predict politics, right? But
Yeah, right.
yeah,
Absolutely.
so what's going to be the long-term impact, for good and even for bad of COVID? What are the lessons that, these organizations have learned from the impact of COVID financially?
Yeah, I think that you know, tail risk of events, that they think could never happen actually more frequently than we expect. So as I think, when people are modeling, and I'm talking about the finance side now of different of our clients, modeling some of these other scenarios out to make sure that with these asymmetric shocks, that the company is resilient through that. The companies in the JP Morgan portfolio, or at least the ones that are banked with my group, were very, very resilient. As I said, the bank market was always open to them, even when cap markets shut for a little while. So I think it's being prepared for some of these events, these unforeseen things that are actually much bigger than anybody would predict. I think that some of the reliance on outside U.S. suppliers of different manufactured goods, I think that there is going to be a push for some of that to be not completely insourced in country, but at least to have more redundancies than we saw. That was something that was exposed through COVID, and I think I think that that's just from a defensive standpoint. That's something that people want to continue to remedy. The telehealth angle that pulled forward that technology by years. That's something that we learned. That's here to stay. Um, so yeah, and I think those would be the major things.
And do you think, I mean, it's interesting when I look at it, healthcare organizations learned that they needed good IT partners to
Yeah.
be successful in this changing world, whether they had to scale up telehealth, whether they had to do remote work, well, all those things. Do you think the same is true on the financial side of things as far as, like how do you look at your relationship with healthcare organizations? Do you see it as a partnership? What are the things that could be proactively done now to really make sure that healthcare organizations are nimble when whatever might come in the future, since we
Yeah,
realize
yeah.
we can't
Look,
predict it?
it was when the capital markets shut and the only source of funds were the banks. Of course, the clients came to us. A lot of them drew down on the revolving credit facilities out of just an abundance of caution. You have finance staffs that had been through the downturn, 08, 09, and they watched liquidity dry up. Didn't want that to happen. JP Morgan speaks frequently about its fortress balance sheet and how we can withstand these incredible shocks. And we were able to get, when our clients came to us, we were able to get them money. We saw, some of our competitors not be able to do that. And so, when these large shocks came, they actually fell away in their ability to help fund them. So the relationship aspect, with the companies and their banks is incredibly important. And whenever we go through one of these crises, that always comes up. It's who can you actually trust to get you the liquidity when they say they're going to back the credit? Can they actually do that?
Right.
And it did lay bare some of those institutions that couldn't do that.
Yeah. Well, and cash is king in a crisis. So
Yes, for sure. Yeah, look, we had, and not just our clients, just healthcare, all kinds of companies drawing down their entire revolvers just to make sure that they've got cash. They didn't need it at the time, but nobody knew how long this is going to last. Nobody knew if we were going to have a vaccine. In some cases where businesses were completely shut down, actually not generating a single dollar of revenue, do they need to have cash on the balance sheet to burn for 3 years? And so, I will say the interesting thing is so many of the companies that did draw down, we had massive draws in the second quarter. Those revolver draws are generally down around the same levels as they were pre-COVID. So sort of spiked up, they held on to it, paid it down, and so we're sort of back to pre-COVID levels.
Wow, great insight. Well,
Sure.
thanks so much, Bret. I appreciate you sharing this perspective on, kind of how COVID impacted the financial health of a lot of healthcare organizations. So thanks so much. We've been here with Bret Schiller from JP Morgan Commercial Banking. If you want to find more great healthcare IT content like this, be sure to check it out at healthcareittoday.com. Thanks, Bret.
Perfect. Thank you, John. Thank you, everybody.